Hey, Jack. All right. You got the stuff?
Yeah. All cleaned and oiled.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's get it on.
Who are these guys?
It's my theme music. Every good hero should have some.
Hot damn, it's time to get down to the jam. It's time to get down, it's time to get down, it's time to get down to the jam. I said it's time to get down to the knowledge, gonna get on down with the know. On the morning coffee show, on morning coffee with Keith, here on Pop Culture Minefield.
Excuse me, can I get a cup of coffee? Black?
Can't you see we talking white?
Good morning, everyone.
Wait a second.
Wow.
Wait a second. I have something for you. Now you can go.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's Keith and Martin with our good buddy and the man with really the real plan. It's Gary.
Yay!
Morning. Hey, we're back. It's been weeks since you saw me.
Oh wow!
It seems like I don't even remember this place.
Yes. Well, today we are celebrating Star Trek. That's the only way to do this. Mainly because the anniversary itself is actually on Sunday, so it's not like we're going to do a Sunday show just for that. I decided to just go ahead and start the celebration now because Star Trek is that important of a show. And while there are other versions, as far as I'm concerned, this show's the best, hands down. It's like people who aren't James Bond fans and aren't fans of Sean Connery, which still amazes me that I actually know of at least one or two people that qualify for that. And
I've seen
Gary, you and I are going to we're definitely going to have to do another James Bond show. It's about that time. It's about
especially
time
when
reminded
they're going to murder James Bond some more.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that still blows my mind that they're just going to go ahead and do that. I wish there were more actors like Jenna Ortega who can stand up and say, yeah, that's not something I'm interested in. I think they lost a lot of people who were interested in the part by announcing all of those changes that they're going to make to the character. Because it definitely looks like Henry Cavill doesn't want to do the part now,
Yeah, they want to modernize it. It's like, well, if you modernize him, he's not James Bond anymore.
There you go. And it's, I don't know.
I did like the idea that
his
name had, if he directed it, he was going to make it a period James Bond. And I thought, yeah, that's the way they should do it. Because that's what it was written.
Tarantino had some good ideas, but again, he's resigned to now never making this. And that's fine. You've got a lot of people involved who just aren't really the kinds of people who should be doing hardly anything connected to Star Trek, unfortunately. It is a sad fact that Star Trek as an IP has not been what it should be these last 8, 9 years. Much to the chagrin of my other twin brother, Robert Meyer Burnett, and a few others who just aren't fans of a lot of the recent stuff. And it's hard to think of anybody that I know personally that is a fan of a lot of this stuff. It's sad, really. But this is a show, Star Trek, that really does deserve recognition because it helped to change the game, both in terms of television and entertainment. And again, for those of you who like to point out to me, oh, I'm a Star Wars fan, that's fine. You wouldn't have had Star Wars without Star Trek. I'm sorry to say. Star Trek went off the air and its fans kept it alive. For 10 years, kept it alive. And it may not sound like that's a long time, but,
a lot of people died in 10 years.
There's a lot of things that happened in those 10 years. So
that was the flaw in Lucas's plan. I said, you realize by waiting years the way you do to make films, a lot of your fandom dies. Never seeing the fucking movie. Just saying.
Well, it happened during even making these new films, but yeah, it's unfortunate that life happens still. I wish you could put it on pause as a fan and tell life not to make any major changes in your life until at least you see how the story plays out. But Star Trek is, again, one of those shows that changed the business, and with Twilight Zone, changed fantastical television for the better. I would like to say that, in my personal opinion, outside of Gene Roddenberry being himself and having this great idea, Gap After Dark, hello. I think that it is really worth repeating how important the writing staff of this show was, because not enough people really give them any real credit. Nowadays, you have a lot of the newer people make fun of the writers. And my only response is, if you're one of the writers of some of the current stuff, you need to sit your backside down, because you've got no room to make fun of anybody that wrote for Star Trek, period. And it is an easy case to make that all of these writers are your better if you're writing current Trek. And again, I know there's people out there that like Strange New Worlds is supposed to be like, no. That's simulated stuff is what that is. I hate it a little less than I do. I can't say hate. Hate's a strong word. I don't mind Strange New Worlds as much, but it still misses a lot of stuff. And for the most part, it deconstructs Star Trek more than anything else. It's not really a show for fans of Trek. It's a show for people who were either never really fans of Star Trek, or people that wanted Star Trek to be different than it was. And that's unfortunate, because Star Trek, again, is just an incredible show. Led off by Gene Roddenberry, Gene L. Kuhn, who, again, if there's any other person that should definitely stand up and take credit for a lot of what Star Trek is, it's Gene L. Kuhn. And it is he that created the one thing that Kurtzman Trek hates. he not only was the creator of the Klingons, but he was really the creator of the Prime Directive. And that is something that the current stewards of Star Trek, especially people from Discovery, the writers of Discovery and the writers of Strange New Worlds, they hate the Prime Directive. They hate that with a passion. But the Prime Directive is at the heart of what Star Trek is. It may not have started out like that initially, and like a lot of TV shows, what the current people try to argue is really disingenuous. Every television show, I don't care what you name, when you start your show, there's the show that you plan. Okay, there's the show that you work on, and then there's the show as it is, especially as it's presented to the public. Shows evolve over time. And how Star Trek started is not exactly where it stayed. And one of the things was the Prime Directive. You know, that was one of the things that was kind of mysterious originally, not something they talked about too much. But it's a show that evolved over time because the writers found different things. It's easier to grow the show once you've already got a cast and you start writing towards things that you find as the show goes along. It happens to every television show. You know, you can plan to make this actor over here your big actor, but no one can plan for how the public reacts to how an actor or actress portrays their part. And then you start writing to the strengths of whatever character that is to keep the fan base involved. Data as a character in The Next Generation was never really meant to be one of the highlight characters. He was meant to be a part of the entire ensemble. But fans really took to the character, so they started writing towards that. Happens all the time. And with Star Trek, it was Spock. That's just the way it worked. Fans really gravitated towards how Leonard Nimoy's interpretation of the character and the way he, in combination with the scripts that he was given, they liked what they saw. So it was easy just to ride that wave and to write more scripts that allowed him to show more parts of the character. It's one of the things that I feel bad for a lot of the other actors who have come since Nimoy played the character, because many of them are missing out on some really good writing, which to me is the biggest thing about Star Trek currently, is that I like all of the actors involved, whether you're talking Discovery or Strange New Worlds. They just lack really good writing. Wolverine 66. Jon Stewart Green Lantern is reportedly going to be younger, reckless protege to an older, gruff, and no-nonsense mentor in Hal Jordan. Okay. Let me take time out of the Star Trek thing and jump into this as a fan. First, I'm going to give you my fan reaction, which is
Okay.
I hate it. I hate this. I hate it. Jon Stewart deserves a hell of a lot more respect than the way they're going to write him. It's another angry young black man. They keep writing.
I'm so tired of angry black men, man.
I know it. I know it,
you guys.
Gary,
Old
please,
young hair.
Gary, take a look at the private
I'm
chat.
sorry. Well, you saw what I said in our private chat over on Facebook, the group chat, was that I sure hope that he listened to Ryan Reynolds' experience playing Hal Jordan. I sure hope so.
Well, I hope the writers have. I don't think they have. And then the
Hollywood
casting,
can't learn a lesson, you know that.
Well, they've already screwed the show up. I said it in our group chat, and it bears repeating. Okay, everybody does realize that Hal Jordan is the same age as Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent and a lot of the other heroes, especially Barry Allen. They're about the same age. They're within 1 or 2 years of each other. If you're someone under the age of 35, basically what you've been getting is they keep dipping back into this whole Hal is older thing, except that they don't explain why he is older. Well, first thing you got to realize is Hal is the same age as all these other heroes. His advanced age was because of a parasite that he had. It was part of a storyline that they had. And so some have taken that to mean that he's actually older than everyone else, when in actuality, he's not. In fact, Jon Stewart and he are about maybe three years difference, give or take. But for whatever reason, they don't seem to be interested in allowing Hal and John to be peers or partners. They want to have it to where they can keep Hal old enough to get rid of him at any time so they can make Jon Stewart the primary Green Lantern. John provides a different experience, like Hal provides a different experience, like Guy provides a different experience. I know that there are other lanterns, but those are your 3 original lanterns. And I do use air quotes because I know that Alan Scott was the first. But those are your 3 original lanterns as far as this version of the Green Lantern story goes. And that I think personally part of the other reason why they give Hal such a hard time is because of his political views. Hal Jordan was actually the first conservative Republican in comics who admitted that he was a Republican conservative.
A man after my heart.
And so, it's one thing to have somebody admit that, especially during the time period that he did. But to also have him be this ladies' man and this daring do adventurer, some people still can't accept that. Meanwhile, you have someone like Jon Stewart. And people just naturally assume that Jon Stewart would be the exact opposite, that he would be a liberal Democrat, when in actuality, Jon Stewart is more of a conservative himself. He's more of a conservative Democrat in that way of thinking. Again, another type of character that you haven't seen very much of in comics, even though they do exist. I'm sure that for this television show, they won't let him be. But there's a lot about Jon Stewart that, again, if you were one of the people that liked the series Justice League, there's a lot about Jon Stewart that you don't know. That show is really an alternate universe version of the character of John, because they don't play into a lot of the stuff that makes John truly unique. The fact that he's a college graduate, a Marine, an engineer, and more importantly, he's married. He's married. Of course, they didn't decide to go down that road with the Justice League series. They kind of left that part out. But Jon Stewart is a married man. And that's an incredible part of the story of the character. He's married to a fellow Green Lantern. And Kat Matui is her name. And great character, kick butt character. And guess what? She was his when he joined the Green Lantern Corps, she was his trainer. And that story is a story that, for whatever reason, a lot of people currently running DC Comics just sort of let go. And that's, again, it shows that they're not interested in having strong and stable and committed characters who just happen to be black in media. It's always got to be the same thing. It's the same thing. When they made the last Fantastic Four movie, oh, well, we're going to make Johnny Storm black. Well, it's the same thing. Well, he's got to be black, young, and angry. Always about.
How do we
something.
explain him being a brother to, Sue?
I don't.
He's adopted. You couldn't go far enough to say, well, different mom, same dad, or flip it. They're adopted. They'll take the step, but they won't go the step far enough. Going, well, there was that period. Well, Dad was really into some funky shit.
They had to make Sue adopt it, and that's the other.
Yeah, they flip it the other way. Jesus
they flipped it the other way. I always said, look, if you really wanted to be different, with that one, there's another way you could have gone. But Johnny is such that if you make Johnny black, he comes off as a cookie. His base personality automatically makes him generic if you flip his race. That's all I've ever said about that particular issue. It doesn't seem like we're going to get very much, in my opinion, at this point, that we're going to get very much out of doing what they've done with this show. And I know that there are people that are Josh Brolin's fans and want to see him do this. My only thing is that you are missing out on so much. There's a lot that can be gained by having two characters that are close to the same age, but with different experiences. Again, two different branches of the military. One being a former Marine, the other one being an Air Force pilot. One had a very good career, and the other one didn't exactly serve out his entire time in the military. At least not easily. One has a very thoughtful way of viewing things and is trained to deal with stuff. So no matter the situation, he knows exactly how he wants to handle it. And the other one is fly by the seat of your pants. And then you get down to their political beliefs, and it's the exact. It's kind of surprising. Anyway, let me wrap up the whole Lanterns thing by saying this. They're going to try to entertain us, and I hope that they can entertain us. I'm not against having talent. I'm not against Josh Brolin per se. I just think that I think it would have been easier to go with a younger actor. And in my opinion, they should have gone with Glenn Powell, who would have made a much better Hal Jordan. Glenn Powell looks like Hal Jordan. He just looks like Hal Jordan. He's got that attitude. He can almost be an asshole sometimes. And but I mean that's Hal. Hal is the guy. And John is the other half of the equation, John's just no nonsense. He doesn't joke around very much. Putting on that ring, means that he's there to work and get stuff done. Hal, it's all about freedom. You know, I get to do something kind of cool, you know. But with John, you know, it's the next mission. I mean, he has fun too, but I mean, putting on that ring means that somebody's in trouble and you got to go handle your business. To me, it should have been a galaxy spanning version of I Spy, modern day. And they decided to take the cheap and easy way out and go with the obvious sort of patented formula of the older guy, younger guy. And that's unfortunate because that shows you that just like with Into the Spider-Verse, you got to bring down one in order to basically play up the other. You know, that's my biggest criticism of the Into the Spider-Verse films. Peter Parker has to be a complete loser so that Miles Morales can be uplifted. You know, Peter has a lot of bad luck, but he's not a loser, you know, but they're afraid to have real Peter Parker and put him in those films because it might upstage what you're trying to build with Miles Morales. So
yeah, they make him into a two-dimensional character.
Yes.
And that way they can work around him and all that shit. And it's clearly not really Peter Parker. It's a facsimile of Peter Parker.
Yeah.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
Those of us that grew up on Peter Parker as a character know the levels of the character and the difficulties he had. And they throw in a little bit of personal drama, and then they go like for a pocket scene, and then the rest of the time he's like comic relief.
Yeah. And again, I understand that's supposed to be, you know, it is really about Miles Morales, but you don't have to, hey, big man, but you don't have to bring down one character in order to play up another. You don't have to do that. If you're really good writers, you could do that without bringing anybody down. In fact, bring the best of what all these characters are able to do. Current Hollywood just really deals in a lot of it's getting to be the same because a lot of the writers that they have don't have talent. I mean, it's something that Gary's been saying for a long time, and a lot of you out there need to listen to him. You know, he knows something about writing, and he's not the only one. You know, Script Doctor and various others have been saying it for a long time. These writers are really, really very limited, and it's one of the things that one can say about the current people running Star Trek. They are extremely limited.
Very much so. Hey, I hate this, but I got to bounce. Julian,
yeah, you go ahead.
Me, so I got to go deal with business. So I will catch you later, man. Good seeing you, Flash. You look like you're wearing scrubs right now. What's up with that?
I've got like a baseball jersey thing on. I had a
surgery
appointment today, so no, it's like a
Batman.
Yeah, well,
imagine that. What are the odds of it being Batman?
Yeah.
All right, guys. I'll see you later.
Have a good one, Gary.
See you, buddy.
See ya.
Well, Star Trek. Let's get back to that because, look, as far as I'm concerned, Star Trek really is the show that has done more to teach me about the business as far as in creating television and film, mainly because those of us that grew up in the 70s and the 80s were very limited in the books that we could find and read that would teach us about television production and film production. And for me, the making of Star Trek was really that book that taught me a lot. Now, was it a dry book? Did I feel like there were times when I would just couldn't slog through a lot of those words? Yes. But I also knew I was learning a lot. I came to have an understanding. And by the time I finished the book, I not only had a better understanding of television production, but I had a deeper love of really Star Trek. It heightened my love for what Star Trek actually was. And I felt like having an understanding of how the television show was put together made me want to go out and read more books that talked about that. There you go. That's a good book.
Yeah.
That is a really good book.
Yeah, right there.
Okay, if I
That's an amazing book.
Okay, show it again.
show it one
Show
more
it again.
time. One more time.
Yep. This one right here.
Yeah, Stephen and Whitfield and Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah.
That book was actually used for a few years in college courses about television production.
Great stuff in it.
Oh, look, it isn't just about the actual production. The
No.
first half of the book is all about how to create a television pitch. You know, and that was the first book that taught me what a Bible was outside of the conventional, what I understood what a Bible was. But in television terms, a show Bible. And how to put together a writer's room and the kinds of writers that you need and all that stuff. It basically, the people currently running Star Trek needed that book. Because they had a hard time initially with STD. And they needed to have they needed to run a Star Trek camp, mini camp, to help teach people what Star Trek was. Which, again, if half the people you're hiring as writers are not fans of Star Trek, how is this a good thing? I mean, that's like, hey, let's make a Batman movie. Does anybody know what Batman is? I mean, what is that? Guess we got to find somebody to teach us who Batman is. It's just, ugh. Anyway, as I had talked about before, the greatest strength, in my opinion, of what Star Trek really was could be seen through its writers. And starting at the top, as I said before, Gene L. Coon, who was instrumental in creating the Klingons, and again, you got to understand, Klingons initially were not meant to be the villains of the series originally. The original villains of Star Trek were meant to be the Romulans. And because of how the show was, the behind the scenes machinations with their production company, Desilu, and the selling of 2 shows instead of 1, they weren't given enough money to be able to fund both shows, and so Star Trek took the hit. So the show was actually meant to be more than even what we saw. The original plan for Star Trek was to make it more like Forbidden Planet as far as its look. They had a lot of plans to use a lot of they were going to use a lot of matte paintings. They had plans to do more as far as makeup effects. I mean, the show was really going to try to kick science fiction forward a little bit. And when their production budget got cut, they basically had to scramble to do the best that they could with what they had. And so, in that particular instance, you have to lean heavily into the one thing that you could still do, which is write. And so you had an incredible group of writers, DC Fontana, Jerome Bixby, Theodore Sturgeon, the incredible Richard Matheson, Norman Spinrod, Stephen Kendall, and the incredible David Gerald, I'm sorry, Margaret Arman, Harlan Ellison. I mean, this is just a murderer's row of talent. And many of these people had either worked on Twilight Zone or they became known in to fans of science fiction on the literary side of things. Hold on. Wolverine 66 says the worst thing about the original Trek series is the look of the Klingons. Again, it was meant to be a very low-cost way of providing villains compared to what you had with the Romulans, which took a lot more time and cost more money, mainly because you had to make sure that everybody had a pair of ears, and then you had to make sure with the makeup and everything else. I think they handled everything about as well as they could. But the Klingons really were meant to be more... They were meant to be... I don't want to use the word simpler, but they were meant to have an obvious contrast to how you presented the great men and women of the Federation.
Well, they were the antithesis of the Federation.
Yeah. Well, but that was kind of what they were aiming for originally with the Romulans. Mm-hmm. You know, but because of their financial situation, it wasn't always possible to be able to afford to have the Romulans in every show. So they had to find a low-cost villain. And it was just easier to just find a bunch of men and darken their skin a little bit and give them, compared to the Romulans, not as extensive costuming. It's actually kind of simplistic. But what they had as far as their goals just seemed to really play into how the show was written at that time. I do agree with Wolverine. I mean, it's not... I like the Klingons. I didn't love the Klingons. But it at least heightened those particular episodes when you had the Romulans. It made the Romulans more special when they were presented. I just... Overall... It's another one. It's another example of having to basically do the best with what you had, and that's the thing that current writers of Star Trek don't know how to do, because they've been given everything they could ever want. The budgets on those shows are out freaking outrageous, and it's great, but they don't have the writing that matches their budget. You need to have writers that are capable of coming up with some really deep and incredible plots that take advantage of not only having the characters go through a particular story, but as we learn post Next Generation, really, how to tell more personal stories. I think an entire generation have been raised on how the next generation tells their stories, more so than they were raised on the original Star Trek program's way of telling stories. Uh, which is all right, you know. Again, Next Generation was fun, but Star Trek in and of itself was just a great series, and it was capable of anything, telling any types of stories. It wasn't really limited by too much outside of the budget. And again, if their budget had been bigger, who knows how far they would have gone. But again, they had an incredible writer's room. You had Gene Roddenberry, who helped keep everything going down the road that he was wanting to go down with these stories. Because it would have been really too easy for them to have tried to really play. It would have been too easy for them to kind of try to do what they were doing on shows like Lost in Space. Not that there's anything wrong with Lost in Space. Lost in Space is more of an adventure program, a family adventure program, but still an adventure program with its tongue firmly planted in cheek in certain aspects. And you know what? Having a show like Star Trek matched up against something like a Lost in Space, it was definitely, you would never really confuse both those programs. The writing for Star Trek was much different than what you had with Lost in Space.
Well, Lost in Space got to be more and more campy and comedy. It's centered just around Dr. Smith and Will and the robot.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, they leaned heavily into the comedic aspects of it. And I mean, the show is what it is, and that may be some of the charm of it, but I think it also, as far as it being taken as serious science fiction, that it hurt it.
It did. It did. I mean, because when they were playing right into how you would have these different plots revolve around Will and the robot and Dr. Smith, it kind of took away from all the other characters they had on the show. I mean, with Star Trek, you still had, you know, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and the rest of the supporting cast. And again, that is what they were hired for. They are all supporting casts. Star Trek is not an ensemble series, contrary to how a lot of the other shows were done years later. But Star Trek in and of itself is not an ensemble show. That's not the way the show is written. That's not the way the plots come across. And that's another thing that people who are big fans of shows like The Next Generation, I think that's part of the reason why it's so difficult for certain Next Generation fans to get into how Star Trek actually was. Because they totally expect all of the characters to be, you know, they expect it all to be quote unquote equal. And it's not. Irwin Allen was more of an adventure fan. You know, he's more of the Jules Verne, Edgar Rice Burroughs type of storyteller. And that's not necessarily the same as being a science fiction writer. It's a whole, that really is just a slightly different genre. And both shows are a testament to that. And speaking of Irwin Allen, I'm going to just take a moment out here to just say that it is difficult as I get older to watch as a lot of the creatives and actors and actresses that I grew up watching get older and eventually pass away. And yesterday, one of those people did, and that was James Darren. I really cannot. I mean, I really can't think of a time when I wasn't watching James Darren.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he became a star before I was born because he was already. I mean, the Gidget movies predate me even being alive, so he had already become a known quantity prior. You know, prior to me seeing him for the first time in Time Tunnel,
Mm-hmm.
which is where I came to understand him from. And then, you know, by the time you get to you get into the 80s and he's doing TJ Hooker, you know, which was kind of cool, you know. But the big surprise was him winding up as part of the cast of Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, he's a great character.
Oh wow! Look, if somebody had told me that his character of Vic would become as important to the story overall as he did, I would have said they were crazy. And yet they really made you care about this person. Well, a hologram was really what he was. And unlike the Doctor from Voyager, Vic wasn't really trying to be anything other than what he was. He's a lounge singer from Vegas. That's it, you know. And again, James Darren was one of those people that I had always hoped to catch at a convention. You know, I've been trying to make my way to at least meet a lot of the creatives and actors who I grew up watching. And it just goes to show that I should probably try harder because there aren't too many left.
No.
This is starting to get noticeable. You know, there are still those, but there are not as many as there were 10 years ago. You know, what do you say, Flash?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just a testament of how old you and I are getting, also. But
Yeah,
yeah, it just it's very sad because, like you said, we grew up watching these guys, so having them gone, you know, really, it kind of cuts out a little chunk of childhood every time we lose one. It's just a little piece of the puzzle that's missing now. So it's you know, sometimes it's tough. It's like I dread the day that I see that William Shatner's passed. I mean, that's just gonna kill me because
yeah,
I just really admire the actor, and I really just love the roles that he was in. He was a big influence, you know, on growing up. So yeah, I mean, it sounds silly, you know, they're actors, they're just doing a job, you know. It's not unlike a guy that's your electrician or you know, a guy that works on your car, but the characters that they played and how they influenced your life, you know, they're fall slightly short of family.
yeah. Well, I mean, we've watched them so much, and especially when it comes to Star Trek. Well, I can't speak for you, but I know, you know, I can remember when Star Trek was this must-see show in the 1970s. We're talking right at about 72, 73, 74. And it just became that show that everybody had to watch, and 79 episodes goes by real quick, even if you show one a day,
The introduction of the animated series, I think I'd seen a few Star Treks just here and there because I watched whatever the caregivers had on TV, so I watched whatever they were wanting to watch. But Saturday mornings the TV belonged to me, so that's kind of where I knew of Star Trek and I'd seen a few episodes, but the animated series really cemented my love of that show.
It is that the animated series is again another example of having the right kind of writers for what you were trying to do.
Well, they brought a lot of the same writers over from the live action series, so you still had DC Fontana in charge, and you may have discussed it before I was able to get on, but Gene Coon. If not for Gene Coon, we wouldn't have had the Star Trek that we got, and we did suffer after he left. And until Roddenberry stepped aside and let Gene take over a lot of the heavy lifting, some of the early episodes, you could see the influence of Roddenberry versus the influence of Gene Coon, who did a lot of the script rewrites, and a lot of times Roddenberry would come in at the last minute just so he could stamp his name on it and do the script polish, but oftentimes didn't do really much of anything other than just change a couple of scenes, change a little bit of dialogue. Having DC Fontana as somebody that was invested in the show as Gene Coon was with creating the show really made a difference. And the animated series, it is what it is. You're taking scripts that, had they been, lengthened out to an hour and had been slightly less kid friendly, the writers of the animated series, they were told to not write this for children. They said, for the most part, we want you to just write a Star Trek episode, but try to pare it down into 22 minutes. I think if some of those episodes had been expanded upon, they would have been just right up there with some of the finest of the live action stuff.
Well, Shinofsky, let me at least help you here a little bit. Spock's Brain, that's season 3, episode 1, if I remember. So that's under the purview of Fred Freiberger.
Yeah.
So
and this was the first of 2 science fiction series that man killed.
Yeah.
The other being Space 1999. It was, you look at that show, the season 1 and season 2, it was like it was almost not the same show.
Yes.
And he turned something that was in very cerebral science fiction stuff and turned it into Monster of the Week. And
he basically turned it into Lost in Space in certain
Yeah.
And again, there's nothing wrong with Lost in Space if that's the kind of show you're making.
For its premise and what it was on its own, yeah, but you can't come in and take a solid sci-fi and turn it into science fiction, Batman, Adam West.
Yeah, yeah. It is the one thing that you have from a lot of the people that love to criticize the show, and when I say the people, I'm trying not to point my fingers too much at the producers and writers of current Star Trek, because they have to laugh and make light of Star Trek, because first of all, it helps them to not feel like complete failures that they are in what they're able to do. And let me also, Peter Venkman, let me also point something out. There is a difference between JJ and Alex. JJ just wants the money. You know, he has a respect of sorts for Star Trek. Okay. He may not know it very much. He may not have grown up and given it the same kind of attention that he gave Star Wars. But he does have a level of respect. Alex Kurtzman has no respect at all for Star Trek. He and his people just don't. They have a respect for the version of Star Trek they've created. That's what they respect.
Rick Berman, in all fairness, suffered from that. He had no love of the old series and tried like hell to distance the old series when he was running Next Gen. Same reasons, and I maintain that when Rick Berman left Next Gen to go work on DS9, that Next Gen got better, and DS9 he was running that when he left DS9. DS9 got better. So that's an opinion.
Yeah. And I agree with you, Wolverine. JJ Trek over Kurtzman Trek. I also say this: JJ was the one that was interested in having Quentin Tarantino. Kurtzman wasn't. You know, JJ was more than interested. And again, it comes down to what he was wanting out of it. JJ's biggest thing was he needed something to generate some money that he could, to generate funds so he could eventually make money from the merchandising. That's really his only thing with Star Trek. He needed to have movies that would make the merchandising easier. Kurtzman, in making him and placing him in charge of Star Trek, saw no way he could allow Quentin Tarantino to do anything and get anything out of it. If Quentin Tarantino had come in, that was just a further highlight to how non-talented he is overall in referring to Alex Kurtzman. His ego is such that you have to be willing to play in the sandbox he built, or else he's not going to give you the time of day. And that's the reason why Kurtzman is going to make, if he stays at Paramount, is going to make the future of Star Trek very bleak, very dark, and very non-entertaining. His ego is such that he is really going to try hard to place his version of Star Trek and its characters on the big screen. That's really what he wants. He wants them to do movies. My whole thing is give him one movie and let's see how much money he loses at the box office. You know, so it really is such that it really is, in my opinion, a major black eye when you have someone that really is just not that big of a fan. And in the case of, say, Akiva Goldsman, who loves to point out that he's got an Academy Award, he really is beyond delusional. His explanation, hold on, John Smith says, I'm not a fan of JJ, but at least he had the decency of placing his new Trek in a different universe. Unlike Kurtzman, who seems to be on a mission to destroy our memories of Roddenberry, Berman, Trek. Okay, that is true.
Give John Smith an award. He's 100% right.
But John Smith also has to realize the thing about JJ is that he knows when to listen to his talent. And in the case of in this particular case, he knew enough to know when to defer to someone else. I think his movie Star Trek, as I said before, was really just an attempt to try to translate this old 1960s series and trying to update it so that he could figure out a way of financially benefiting from a lot of the products and stuff that would be spun off from that. The upside and downside at the same time of doing that is that he ended up hiring a pair of writers, in this case, Robert Orci and Alex Kurtzman. Orci being the upside and Kurtzman being the downside. Orci was a big Star Trek fan. And so everything they got right in doing that's Orci. That is Orci all day and 10 times on Sunday. So Orci was just one of the biggest Star Trek fans out there. Period. You know, Kurtzman, on the other hand, wasn't. And I know others in the chat have started talking, oh, this person's not a... Let me tell you something. I know people have mentioned Michael Piller and Rick Berman. Kurtzman is way worse than both those guys put together. He has absolutely no love at all for anything that is not somehow connected to what he can make money from.
Yeah.
And considering...
we had this discussion last week when you did the Batman thing about... it's the egos, just the immense narcissistic egos that are just running rampant now, that are just poisoning these franchises. As far as I've got to make my own spin on it. So look, like with the current Star Trek stuff, the Strange New Worlds Discovery, you know, that's fine. That's fine. You know, it's their stories. They, you know, deal with it. It's when they start canon breaking and they start arguing, well, no, this is the new canon. Well, that's not how that works. They've got they had the perfect opportunity to distance themselves from the original series and Next Gen and DS9, whatever they wanted to do. They have the perfect opportunity to do that. And just run free and do whatever storylines they want to and retcon whatever they want to, if they would just make the simple admission that this is a separate timeline that was started in First Contact. So when the Enterprise made contact with Zefram Cochrane, he saw the Enterprise, history changed, and at that point, you're on a divergent timeline. The old stuff, DS9, Next Gen, all of that stuff happened as we remember it, but they are not satisfied with that. They're like, no, this is prime continuity and you're going to like it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And that's the unfortunate thing. That is the stuff that truly will kill the entire thing.
Well, that's what's killing it.
Yeah. And again, I have to keep repeating this. These criticisms are not aimed at any of the actors. These criticisms are not aimed at any of the people that have built the sets, costumes, do makeup. No. None of those people are. They are all meant to, you know, as far as I'm concerned, everybody that makes that show deserves a lot of thanks and awards and whatever they can get their hands on. My criticisms always are aimed at the producers and at the writers. You know, period. Whether I'm talking STD or Strange New Worlds or any of the other shows they produce, it's always aimed at the producers and writers. And because, again, you're wanting people who have no real love of Star Trek. You fired someone who you hired to give you new Star Trek, then took their ideas and gave it to someone who had no love of Star Trek and expected everything to go a certain way. Like, you guys are going to start mass producing money after a while. Everybody's going to get rich. And when that didn't work out, you find all these weird, stupid reasons to keep a guy who's costing you money around. And again, they gave this guy his own television show. He has gotten 2 TV shows after doing all of what he's done to Star Trek. And both shows got canceled. This guy can't keep anything going. Technically, as I said even last week, he shouldn't even have a career right now, because he got sued because a script he wrote kind of matched something that somebody else had written, and decided to take him, the producers, the director, and the studio to court. And pretty much they had to pay a lot of money to get out of that. His career was basically non-existent when that happened. And it is only because of J.J. Abrams that he was able to get work again. But he continues to repeat a pattern, talking about Alex Kurtzman, which is every time he tries to strike out and do something creative, he ends up either screwing it up, or if it is something that is completely rejected by the fan base, he finds a different list of people to blame. You name it, he's blamed them for it. And Kurtzman himself has become the king of ending franchises. You add Kurtzman, they added Kurtzman to the list of people that were helping with the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. Well, that only got 2 movies.
Yeah. I love Garfield as Spider-Man. He's probably my favorite of the 3.
Garfield was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
But again, you add Alex Kurtzman to the mix, and mysteriously, we don't get any more Spider-Man, and then he helps to bring down the Spider-Man franchise, and suddenly Universal decides, well, that guy's going to run our new Universal Dark Universe. Let's just give it all to him. And
that's when you start getting your resume together, because you're going to be off the show soon.
Basically, he found a way of, with one movie, sinking an entire planned universe. And what was his response? It was Tom Cruise's fault.
Because he's box office toxin.
So, I just
God.
I mean, that to me is just, and the story that he and his people tell about that entire experience is trying to lay everything at Tom Cruise's feet. Yeah. And notice Tom Cruise's career has never been the same after The Mummy.
Yeah.
He just really can't seem to find any real thing. Oh,
no.
It is just interesting to hear him talk. And his people try to explain away all of these failures. And they are failures. And then, you got to keep a Goldsman trying to put a nice shine on a lot of this stuff. This group is just, they've all lost their minds, is really what it is. And I think if this had just been something that JJ was in charge of, I don't think we would have gone off the rails as much as we had with this stuff. But because Kurtzman has it and he's in charge of it, yeah, to me, I can give JJ a little bit of leeway. It was very smart of Robert Orci, as a Star Trek fan, to build into this version of Star Trek for JJ a kind of an out clause that wouldn't really get them in too much trouble by making it an alt universe and timeline. And the reason why I give Robert Orci that credit is just by what we've seen with Alex Kurtzman. There is no way Kurtzman came up with that. You know, given everything he's done since he and Orci are no longer a duo, it's pretty safe to say that all the really good ideas were from Robert Orci. You know, and I think I'm not saying that Kurtzman may have gotten Orci fired. I'm just saying it's kind of mysterious that Orci was given the boot on writing and directing the third JJ Trek movie at the 11th hour. And as Alex Kurtzman has basically been given control over all of Star Trek. Just saying. You know, timing is everything, kids. But you know, it looks like Mr. Orci is retired and he's doing other things. And Star Trek, under his ex-writing partner's purview, has suffered greatly. So, yeah, I give Robert Orci a lot of credit for all the good things since JJ first decided to step into this universe. But getting back to the original show, getting back to the show that gave us, you know, great episodes like City on the Edge of Forever and The Trouble with Tribbles and Man Trap and Charlie X and A Taste of Armageddon, or one of my personal favorites, A Piece of the Action.
Doomsday Machine, my favorite.
Oh, the Doomsday Machine. And it's all of it, just great writing, you know, just great writing. And again, this is really what separates Star Trek and yes, I know, yes, he's got some legal problems. And I wasn't going to try to go into a lot of that stuff over in 66. I'm not saying that, you know, I never said anything about his character because I don't know the dude. But I look at everything that has happened creatively, and it's safe to say that Robert Orci has had nothing to do with Kurtzman Trek at all. That's all Alex Kurtzman and his people, along with Akiva Goldsman. And it has just been craptacular. It has just been craptacular. You can have whatever creative ideas you want, but really, if you can't find writers that can deliver, then you've got nothing. You know, and that's what it has been like. It's been
new
nothing.
Ideas would help instead of going over same plots and storylines and just re-spinning them.
Yeah. You have a brand new universe that you could have populated and done anything you wanted to do with Star Trek as your basis. Look, here's the thing. Many years ago, J. Michael Straczynski, the guy behind Babylon 5, pitched Paramount on doing that exact same thing. Reconceptualizing Star Trek. And what little I read of that pitch, I would have been down for it. I wouldn't have had a problem with it because it wasn't trying to make you think that, you know, oh, this is meant to be Star Trek and these are the characters. It wasn't that at all. It was to just basically do what DC Comics did with Stan Lee years ago, and having him come in and do his own version of a lot of their characters. It was just basically that. Reconceive it. Find a different way of doing it. Take the basic premise of Star Trek and just do everything. Well, that's technically what Kurtzman should have done if he really despised what was originally produced. He could have come in and made his own thing. In fact, that's really what Brian Fuller was hired to do when he wrote Star Trek Discovery. It was meant to be a whole brand new version of the universe, not an updating. It was to reconceive Star Trek on television.
Well, DS9 kind of did that. I mean, look at it. It's got a hold on the Federation and the established stuff of the Next Generation, but you could take every bit of the Federation out of that and have just as solid a sci-fi show. They were in a new area of space. We had all new adversaries. We had all new allies. Races we'd never seen before, and we were connected to Next Gen, but we were just rehashing Next Gen.
Yeah.
So right there's your prime example that you can take an existing universe and do something entirely different with it and not screw with the old stuff.
Yep. Exactly that. But, Kurtzman's let it be known that he's still headed down that same way. If given the opportunity, he will come back and do more of what has gotten him to this point. So he doesn't think he's done anything wrong. He continues to be rewarded by those executives, majority of whom are still there from CBS, that brought him in the first place. Meanwhile, a lot of the Paramount executives who were saying that this Kurtzman guy is killing our brand, a lot of those executives are no longer at Paramount.
Yeah. Surprise.
So it is, and you know what, James, you're right. There is a difference between alternate reality and reimagining. What Straczynski was going to do and what Brian Fuller had been hired to do was a reimagining, not an alternate universe. They, especially Fuller's job was to reimagine Star Trek. That was the way it was pitched to him. He didn't have to basically show any fealty to anything that they had done in the past. He was to reconceive the entire thing. And that's really where the idea and his show Bible and all the episodes for Star Trek Discovery are a part of. And realistically, had CBS not had that press release just days before the premiere of the show, stating that it was a part of this, that it was really the original Star Trek universe set in the same continuity as the original series, I think CBS was very close to letting them go ahead and do that and seeing it as a whole different, as a reimagining and a completely separate show. It was just a complete reimagining of everything. And that CBS made the decision to instead go a different way. Again, showing you that CBS really didn't know what they were doing with that property. Let's see. John Smith says, with new Trek shows, for the first time, I prefer to live in the present versus that bleak future of new Trek. Also, Shatner and Nimoy were younger than most of these new Trek actors, but act decades older. Well, that's because in the 1960s, they weren't used to having younger actors as the lead of very many TV shows. If you were an actor in your early to mid 30s, that was a good time to probably give you your own TV show. But if you were younger than that, chances are you would not be the lead of hardly any of their TV shows.
No, you'd be playing teenagers.
That's right.
Horribly out of place teenagers.
And Shatner and Nimoy were both 35 when Star Trek started. on average, I mean, kind of young guys, but that is it helps when the person with the idea is the one that's heading up your writer's room. And the thing about Roddenberry is that he was using this as a way of not only telling stories about social ideas that he was interested in, he was also kind of, adding in some of his experiences of being in the military, which really is something that nowadays in Hollywood is a very rare thing. You rarely have people that are the creative heads of any projects that have actually served in the military. And it shows. Gene was someone who had a lot of life experience. A lot of life experience.
And a cop too.
Yeah. His life story nowadays would be enough for somebody to come along and say, maybe we should just turn that into a movie. Because not a lot of people live that way or have lived like that prior to going into the business. On top of that, when you look at a lot of the creatives, they're all basically a lot of them are the same age. So their likes and dislikes. I think we were talking about this last week. When you look at people who were born, say, 1921, as Gene Roddenberry was. When you look at, say, I think Jerry Siegel. I think Jerry Siegel was. I think he's close to that age. I think he was close to that age at one time.
Fairly close, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jerry Siegel. Actually, he was a little older. He was 1914. So, people who were born back then, when you look at everything that happened, by the time you get to the 1930s, there is a love of science fiction literature that a lot of young people have, much the same way that they do with anime and manga now. And it hit kind of like rock and roll did in the 50s. You have a lot of people that just gravitated towards that and loved everything about it. It's the reason why a lot of your major science fiction literary writers, you have an explosion in the 1930s, in the 1940s, and the 1950s of talent. And it had an effect on everything else that came after, especially in the world of Hollywood. You have people that grew up reading that stuff and loving that stuff who were now the creators of a lot of entertainment. And Roddenberry had a background in loving that stuff. So it was easier for him when putting together his writer's room that he wanted people that at least knew what science fiction was. And so chances are, if you are a science fiction fan, you had already watched a movie like Forbidden Planet or Things to Come or Rocket Ship XM, Tom Corbett on TV, or Captain Video, anything from that, and read many of the novels that had been written. You were familiar with with iRobot. Or even books that would eventually come along, like Dune. You know, lots of high concepts and high ideas. And that made for very good entertainment when you watch shows like Twilight Zone or Star Trek.
There's so many good old sci-fi books and series that Hollywood has never touched, either because they're tied up, with other people squatting on the properties or whatever. If no one out there has read any of the stories of this particular author, do yourself a favor and pick them up. You won't find him at Barnes and Noble because he's not a popular author anymore. But Harry Harrison, who wrote Make Room, which turned into Soylent Green. But his series, The Stainless Steel Rat, yourself a favor and read that series of books. At least the first 3 that are compiled into one volume. Just magnificent, like tongue-in-cheek, good, solid sci-fi stuff. Do yourself a favor. They're really, really good. And the fact that maybe it's a blessing that these have never been adapted to a TV or movie. The way things are, it's probably just as well that they haven't been, because they exist so well on the page.
Hail to you, Canadian Spider-Man. Let's go back to John Smith. He had something interesting to say. Let's see. I meant that the characters in the original series acted like competent adults versus crying, putrid adult children, like in New Trek. I wouldn't let these New Trek characters run an ice cream shot, let alone a starship. I can't add anything to that. All I can say is, okay, yes, I concur, Doctor. But again, this is a problem with a lot of the entertainment industry right now. It just makes no sense to spend all that money and time. And the weakest part of a Star Trek series is your writer's room, and the fact that your showrunner has no earthly idea of what he's doing and or talking about.
Yeah.
It's vapid, and it shows within really all their live action stuff, whether you're talking Discovery or Strange New Worlds. It's just vapid more than anything else. There's no thought behind it. Absolutely no thought. And it doesn't help that they're given all this money to do whatever they want with. So there's no attempt to try to think of it as anything even approaching a kind of a reality, which is one of the things about Star Trek that had always been interesting when you're talking about the design of costumes and the designs of sets and the designs of starships and a lot of the technology. There's a thought towards, if this were real, what would it be like? Within Kurtzman Trek, everything is just pretty much this side of fantasy, extreme fantasy. Again, it has its place, but it's not really Star Trek per se. It's more or less like really bad fanfic. I mean, it's really bad fanfic. Again, I know that there are fans of Strange New Worlds that cringe every time I say it, but I mean it. Why would you need the captain's cabin to be that freaking big on a starship? Why would you need that much room? I mean, that's like an apartment. I mean, what did Robert Reinburnett say? It's like, this is like Star Trek written by people whose life experience is pretty much everything that they've ever known and done living on the West Coast in California and never having left the state. how
Well,
they
like-
design things, how they see things. It's all within the bubble of what they know.
Yeah, well, classic Trek. Even the set designs were with the idea that they were serving on a military vessel. Like a cruiser or a sub. There was no room to spare. You gave the crew the bare necessities of what they had to deal with. To get along. You didn't have like opulent rooms and a gigantic bar to hang out in and whatever else. And I'm not dogging on Next Gen, because the Enterprise the D is humongous, and they've probably got room to spare on that. But as far as like the reimagining stuff, the Discovery and Strange New Worlds, it's like it just logistically, that doesn't make sense to me. But it's their show, and if people enjoy those shows, I mean, more power to them. I'm not going to pee on anybody's entertainment with that stuff. But when it comes at the expense of my entertainment, then I have problems.
What is that, Martin?
Oh, I will pee on everybody's entertainment.
I'll just stay out of your way then.
But the thing is, with the ships, yes, the Enterprise D, that there were a different kind of ships. People tend to forget that the denomination of the Constitution class, that was a battle cruiser, a heavy battle cruiser. That's a military ship. The Enterprise D is more for science and consular affairs. That wasn't a battleship. Now, the Enterprise E was a return to form.
Yes.
That is a warship.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and again, as nice as I thought that was, Picard season 3, if David Ellison takes over and tries to get everything back to where it was, that'll be a part of the stuff that won't really be official Trek anymore. It'll just be a side universe. The downside with all of that is it'll just be pushed to the side, meaning that there'll be a whole new history for that and its characters. It'll be relegated to the darker possible history of Star Trek, rather than the official history. Yeah, we've already covered that, Tim. Yeah, you can start over. And again, there have been several people that have had suggestions that over the years Paramount rejected. One of them being J. Michael Straczynski's plan to reignite Star Trek or reinvented. And to be fair, it wasn't just his plan. It was really he and Bruce Zybell, who was the creator behind Dark Skies. The two of them together collaborated on a pitch. If you go to Google, you can find that pitch. They have it up there. Their pitch for Star Trek. And this is what, about 2002, 2003. So, hello, Penny. The lovely Penny, everybody. It's not a show without you, Penny. You do realize that, right? Anyway,
yep. We may like hosts, but never Penny.
Yep. I'm telling you, we can't do this right without you. Let's see. Wolverine 626 says, I'll take Strange New Worlds and even Prodigy over the rest of Kurtzman Trek. But for the love of Trek, get back to real Trek sensibilities. Strange New Worlds, there are times, but I think a lot of that, in my opinion, is the fact they have a really great group of actors. And I just keep thinking, if they even had the worst of the Berman writers, that would still be heads and shoulders better than the writers they currently have. I cringe when I see a lot of the stuff connected to Strange New Worlds. I cringe. Now, is it as bad as, say, the Rings of Deep Power? The writing, it's close. It's close. I still got to give it to the Rings of Deep Power for being the worst, and that's saying something, post Batwoman. But it's just if you're bad, you're bad, and that stuff's just bad.
Well, you can set the bar either direction and succeed in that effort, I suppose. You can be the best or the worst, and I guess it's a feather in your cap either way.
I mean, we really are seeing the extremes with Star Trek, and again, I do get it. There's some of these people, it's a paycheck, they need to get paid and they have an opportunity to write something. And for a certain number of these young writers, I mean, that's their problem. They're young. They have no concept of what Star Trek is.
No.
And it doesn't help that Alex Kurtzman and his people do not want someone to be very familiar with Star Trek. In fact, saying that you are a fan of Star Trek will not get you hired on this show.
No.
First time I have ever have known any show to do something like this. I mean, if you really think about it, I have never known a television show to say, well, we would rather you not be a fan. We'll hire anybody that isn't a fan, which means it's more about personality because it's definitely not about writing ability.
Well, it's like in my industry, we have a tendency that sometimes it's easier to hire a guy that has no experience with what we're doing versus a guy that's had it somewhere else and we have to retrain him. However, that being said, I don't get a guy hired and hand them, their tools and vehicle and say like, okay, now go do the job, because there's no training. It's just because you can write a script doesn't mean that this is the script you should be writing until you get something under your belt.
Yes. And again, it's unfortunate because my understanding of what Brian Fuller was attempting to do was that it wasn't just the fact that this was someone who was an incredibly big fan of Star Trek, who had watched all 79 episodes, and then when he got older, had worked on Berman Trek. This was someone who was given a rare opportunity to just create something brand new using the Star Trek template. And it decided to also bring in a few people who lacked experience in order to give them experience and teach them how to do great work. And I think on some level, may even try to turn them into Star Trek fans themselves. Not something that Kurtzman Trek has done. There was a lot of tomfoolery behind the scenes in getting Kurtzman Trek up and running. And I just think that there were a lot better ways to go. It is no surprise that for all the money that they spent, for all the time they took in filming all the episodes and all the incredible work that was poured into launching Discovery, and you have a show like The Expanse just wipe the floor with Discovery like nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like nothing. And just a lot of thought. You could watch any episode of The Expanse and find yourself looking and paying attention to things, either in the foreground, the background, what the characters are wearing. Everything had a function, everything had a place, and you could come to understand just by watching it what a lot of that stuff meant. Discovery is just like, let's just throw something up there, you know, and then the naming of things. Or how the so-called,
Don't you agree with STD?
well,
Wasn't it genius?
I'm talking Klingon space crystals.
Time
crystals thing. And it's like, what are you guys smoking? And how come you're not sharing with your audience so they can at least find themselves in the same headspace and have a better time? Because that's the only way you could make any of that stuff even plausible, let alone just Klingon time crystals. That sounds like
something from He-Man.
Yeah, or worse. That sounds like a bunch of people trying to make fun of Star Trek who have never watched Star Trek. Oh, wait a minute. That's really all of Kurtzman Trek, huh? I mean,
Time crystals.
Oh wow, that just hurts my brain thinking of how bad, and the fact that you've got these actors having to say these lines, and I just like have to shake my head. You know, Anson Mount deserves to be on a Trek show that really is a Trek show with scripts that are worthy of his time. And the fact that he has to say these lines for that show, or that he even spent any time working on Discovery, just, whew.
Well, you know what? The Strange New Worlds, that's what's part of what's maddening about it, is that since you're setting it before the Kirk era stuff, with the exception of the Cage, you've got an established universe, you've got an established, roughly past, and you know where it ends up. So I mean, it's the framework's already there. All you have to do is start getting clever and plugging some stuff in, and they can't even manage to do that.
Well, that's the reason why, as you had said earlier, it probably would have been better just to, have this be an alternate universe / timeline and go wherever they want to go, not be hemmed in by anything that's come before. I mean, you got this cast, you got this character. What would it have been like had Pike been allowed to serve and stay rather than have his career in life end up the way that they did? What would it have been like had he just stayed on the Enterprise? Of course, they rewrote the characters to such a degree. A lot of the problems that he had within the pilot, the Cage, he doesn't experience. It's a completely different character than what we saw.
Well, and even in the Cage, you could see that he was just kind of burned out and done already. Yeah. He was going through. In the Cage, he was obviously he was a good, follow the orders military man, but he was going through the motions. Just in that one episode, you got a lot of the extent of what the guy was.
Well, it's the way that they ended up. Simon Pegg ended up writing Kirk for Star Trek Beyond. That's exactly it. That's really one of my biggest criticisms of the film, is that Kirk was always excited for the next adventure. He loved being on board the Enterprise. Star Trek Beyond, you got him acting like Pike.
Yeah.
And he really hadn't been at it for very long. That's the other thing. Star Trek Beyond, that is set after the start of the 5-year mission. And he's already 2 years in. And he's like, every day's the same. I'm bored. That's not a Kirk I really want to be around. It's like, dude, come on. Seriously, really? I mean, but again, that's more of a product of the new way of writing things, and also a product of everything that happened after the events of First Contact. It shows how First Contact truly was kind of retro-causal, as Batman, played by Michael Keaton, said in the movie The Flash. Again, happy birthday, Michael Keaton. I really like that explanation of time travel in that film, and it would do a lot to explain how we got Kurtzman's track, was just calling it retro-causal. That the Enterprise and her crew under Captain Picard actually did a lot more damage to the timeline than they thought.
Well, and it's in my headcanon, that's where you get the Bacula Enterprise from, because it had a lot of problems with changing canon. But if you fit it into, see, when Picard and crew went back, to Earth, changed what they changed, and then came back to the present, they had inserted themselves into that new timeline. At that point. So Enterprise is a byproduct of the tampering that had happened before, which is why you get stuff like, well, they're talking about the Gorn and whatever else, that you go like, well, that's really not storyline canonical. It is now.
It is,
if you separate it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I completely agree. I mean, what you get, in fact, I think it affects even the rest of the movies that they make, because that means that everything that happened after First Contact wasn't originally meant to happen.
Right.
Meaning that Data never dies.
Data doesn't die. The Picard series, that's alternate timelines.
That's
all of it.
Yeah. Everything that came after First Contact, including everything that you even saw on the television series. That means Deep Space Nine does not actually end the way that we have seen it, technically. It doesn't end that way.
True.
That doesn't mean it doesn't end, but it has there is a different outcome for every TV show that had been in production at that point.
Potentially, yes.
Voyager comes home a different way. Maybe what old Janeway, what happened to her, was actually the way it should have happened. And considering how far away they were from home,
I did really enjoy like old bitter Janeway going back and changing stuff, because
I
did like the Voyager. wasn't a huge fan of the series. It was okay, but I did like just grizzled old Janeway just pulling Kirk and saying like, well, this needs to change.
And again, it definitely says a lot about Enterprise as a whole, as a series, as to why that show is so uneven. Well, it's because it wasn't meant to have existed originally, But thanks to Picard and his people, they did they didn't just do a little, they did a lot. I mean, let's be fair about their contamination of the timeline. What they ended up doing was completely opposite of everything that they had talked about when they first arrived after following the board. They broke every single rule that they are going into this situation talking about how they weren't going to do it. You contaminate it just by the sheer number of people who you brought in from the Enterprise to work on fixing Cochrane's ship.
Yeah.
For every person that they beamed down, and for every interaction that they had with somebody in that camp, you've caused further damage. And so there was almost no way, unless they would have done some sort of a massive thing where they just had everybody experience, memory loss for the last 2 days, and completely wiping out any knowledge or memory of them. That would have helped. Big
They
time.
needed a ship-mounted neuralizer.
Basically,
that.
that was the only way. And by adding in the whole thing with the Vulcans, that pretty much sealed the deal. Once the Vulcans became involved, then you've pretty much altered that timeline. It was it's a mistake that well, not a mistake, but it's a storytelling choice that I think while it quote unquote feels good, sometimes having a story that kind of feels good in the end may not be the best way to tell that story. There are reasons why there are rules for time travel. And again, as established, there as not just for the next generation characters, they've established this over the years on different shows, DS9, Voyager. There are rules for time travel that you have to follow. And if you don't follow them, then something like this happens.
Yeah.
And you end up with Discovery. Strange New Worlds. You end up with a timeline that is just complete and utter C-rap. So let's see. Here we go. Wolverine says hold on. Wolverine said can't get it there. The Klingon time crystals reminds me a bit of the Chronos Stone from Hercules, the Legendary Journeys. Let me tell you something. I would not be surprised if it actually was, because that's where Kurtzman and Orsi got their big break. They originally worked on Hercules, the Legendary Journeys, and that's they were working on that show when JJ poached them to work on his show. And let's see. John Smith. Shinosky says, hold on, there are no consistent rules for time travel in Trek. Actually, they talk about it in various episodes. Consistent rules, I don't know, but they talk about what you can and can't do. And I
think maybe he's talking more about how time travel works as far as its effects and causes. Maybe and I may be speaking for him.
Yeah.
But no, he's in the original series. He's right. There's it's kind of inconsistent. They don't dwell on it a whole lot as far as trying to justify, because we were just telling a story of the week, and so he's not wrong. He's not wrong. As much as I love Trek, there's plot holes, definitely, but that's time travel in almost every representation in any movie or TV show that it's ever been in. I mean, it's Back to the Future maybe did it best, but there's even it has issues.
But with no, Back to the Future was a mess with the time traveling.
Yeah, that's the reason why I like the explanation in the movie The Flash from Bruce Wayne.
Who made it well? 12 Monkeys. And
12 Monkeys? Yeah.
And even if it was a comedy, it was one of the best. Bill and Ted. Bill and Ted really nailed the time.
Looper did pretty good with it too.
What?
Looper, the Bruce Willis?
No, that was horrible. Oh my God, that's the simple I've ever seen in my life. I love all the actors they use, and I was like, in middle of the movie, I was hating it with all my powers. I almost become a Sith in the theater. Oh no, 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 no! There's no way I can watch that movie again. No. The worst offending part was when the guy is running and they have their younger self and they are mutilating him and the guy's slim just disappears. Oh my god! No, I can't. No, no, no.
You're bringing me
You didn't
back.
like that?
You're
No,
bringing me back.
that was horrible.
Ugh. Okay. Okay. Now you're making a case. You're making a case. I have to admit. Oh man. Okay. Yeah, Shinosky, you are right about that. The Voyager episode where the time cops recruit 7 to 9 doesn't care about consistency. Yeah. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. Well, again, I'd still take that over anything Kurtzman and Goldsman have done. So those guys have a very parasitical existence with Star Trek. See, Wolverine 66, I like Kurtzman and Orsi from the Hercules and Xena days. You know what? I kind of like them until I figured out that the two characters from the episode that they wrote where Kevin Smith is playing Hercules as if he's a real person. And they have him with the people that make the TV series. And they hired 2 of the actors to be playing Kurtzman and Orsi in the cast. And it's just like, okay, so you wrote yourselves into the episode. That's nice.
That's the ultimate ego move is when the writers or whoever put themselves into the comic or the TV show or the movie. It's just like, wow, that is like the height of narcissistic ego.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, Kurtzman is so bad at this. And Orsi at least has to take some hits too, because he was partnered with him for so long. And the one thing that they did that for a long time I thought was like the coolest thing until I went back and looked over it and found out, oh, wait a minute, they were only in that position for maybe a year, and then was the TV show Fringe. They did that with JJ. Well, turns out Kurtzman and Orsi were only, quote unquote, running the show until like the latter half of the first season and going in for the rest of the series. There were 2 other people who were actually in charge of that show. So they just had their names on it after a while. It's like, okay, I was trying to give Kurtzman a pass, or at least on that one. But yeah, he's never really done hardly anything without figuring out ways of screwing it up. I wasn't intending for this show today to be a total love letter to Alex Kurtzman, but since we're on the subject of love and Star Trek and Alex Kurtzman, I would just like to say to Alex Kurtzman, you've had your fun. It's time to go home. Take your money, take all your other C-Rap, and leave before David Ellison has you leave a different way. Because with him, he'll only give you 2 choices. 2. Okay?
The stairs or the window.
I was going to say the roof or the stairs.
I was thinking I use that all the time. And I'm sorry that I missed Gary's take on that movie the other day. I wanted to be there.
I'm going to get you suckered. Look,
brilliant movie.
I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying you've done so much damage, Alex. You with me, you get 2 choices, and it's. I'm telling you, it's you and I at the Sears building, dude. You got 2 choices. Okay. the roof or the stairs. That's it. Now, be glad I'm not saying the elevator shaft. But it ain't going to get any better, man. So, and Akiva Goldsman, well, he gets double whatever you end up getting. So, Shinosky, oh yeah, the temporal Cold War guy in Enterprise, they never explained or told you who TF they were. Yeah, well, there you go.
The show was truncated, so maybe that was in the future.
Yeah. And James, you're right. It was to Legacy stunt cast. Yeah, they had no idea who this person was, and they were hoping somewhere down the line to be able to cast somebody to play that role. John Smith says Kurtzman is so bad that he may have actually redeemed the Insurrection Nemesis era Rick Berman. Yeah, because I would rather watch Insurrection than anything that Goldsman and Kurtzman have done, new. Wolverine 66. Thanks for the STD, Kurtzman. Not. I think the only saving grace is the show is officially done. Now, Kurtzman stays with this. If CBS, if their executives are able to have any say on it, I think they would allow Kurtzman to have an STD movie. I think that's really what he's trying to stick around for. He wants to make a movie.
Some of these guys like Kurtzman and Kathleen Kennedy, they the only thing that I can figure is they've got the client list from Epstein Island. And they're like waving it in front of people saying like, I'm keeping my job, right?
Yeah, well, I you know what? I was about to say something, but I'm not going to say it because it might be best that I just not say what I was about to say. But let's just say, yeah, I'm going to just keep my mouth shut on that one. I really hope someday that at this rate may not come for quite a while, that Kurtzman realizes how much true damage he's actually done to this entire property. Because I'm telling you right now, Star Trek as a whole, if there was, and I think Paramount, the people at Paramount get this, its return as a film. All of this has been under the shadow of Star Wars, and there is no better time if you really wanted to outdo Star Wars than right now. Right now. If Star Trek were in a much better shape, if it were in the hands of people that actually truly cared about it, there is almost no limit to what they could be achieving right now, while all the other IPs are having a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Doctor Who, Star Wars. I mean, really, those are the two that are on either side of it. And if Star Trek were in better hands right now, it would be amazing.
Yeah, because it's not actually been completely and utterly run into the ground. It's in the dirt, but it's not buried itself like the other franchises has.
Yeah.
So it's got, like you said, it's got a great opportunity to rise from the ashes and, kind of assert dominance over being like premier sci-fi, well-written sci-fi. But man, they got to do something like right now to do it.
Pretty much, or we can just, I don't know, attempt to do another, as much as I like them, attempt to do another J.J. Kelvin film, which may end up costing way more money than one should really have to spend making one of those films. Look, no matter what, if they announce tomorrow that they have reached a deal and they're bringing it back, I guarantee you that you're looking at just over $100 million, almost $150 million spent just on bringing all the actors back. Period. That's not paying for sets, costumes. That's not paying for anything. Just with those actors, $150 million right off the top. And Wolverine 66 says one theory is that future guy from Enterprise was going to be a version of Archer. That's interesting. I think that's that's better than what we ended up with, I'll tell you. To get this cast of actors back to at least make a Star Trek 4, maybe more, you're looking right at around $150 million spent. I don't see that happening, even with David Ellison in charge.
There's just, for me, there's just no reason that you could not just continue on. You don't have to you don't have to reboot the series, movie wise. You just take what you've already got. Let's pretend STD and Strange New Worlds doesn't have. You don't have to have Kirk in it. You don't have to have Picard in it. You can have it set in the Star Trek universe with obvious, what happened, and these characters were here and all. You don't have to have those characters in a movie in that universe to make it a successful movie. In fact, for me, it would be more interesting because you're going into a movie with all new characters on a different ship. Everything is a surprise. Yeah. You and I have talked about this for years, that an idea that myself and a friend of mine had that, and this was 30 years ago, we were saying if they really wanted to relaunch Star Trek at that time, we thought it would be great to do it as an anthology series. You have four episodes. 4 episodes sit in this timeline with these actors, and none of them as far as like returning actors, returning characters. It's completely open-ended storyline. You run 4 episodes and you get to know these characters. And at the end of those 4 episodes, you could wipe out the ship, or you could kill off the main character. And then the next, you have 3 more episodes that are set, maybe Pike era or post-movie era, or alongside the Kirk movie era stuff. But you've got characters you've never seen, ships you've never seen. And if something really takes off, it's just like, man, the reviews, just the fan reaction to this 3-episode anthology we did was huge. Let's do a couple more episodes. That took off really good. Guys, we've got a series waiting to happen.
It's the old NBC mystery wheel idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got to where you could have a movie and anything could be a surprise in it. Because they're not going to kill off Picard, obviously or if they do, it's not going to be like a permanent, data dying. But the point is that you're not going to bring in a new character, run them for the course of the movie and kill them off. Not very often this happens. I'm not saying it never happens, but I think with Star Trek, that could be, kind of bring the tension, the adventure back to it with unknown characters. That way you don't have to pull in these high dollar actors to reprise these roles. You do a whole different storyline, whole different ship, whole different actors. And again, you've completely opened up your storytelling abilities. You're not hemmed in by anything except the background of the universe that you're in. In my opinion.
Well, no, good opinion. Good opinion. And again, the anthology idea is something that I think is definitely deserving to be looked into. It's a great idea. It's the American. It's what they said in an article. It's the American Horror Story approach with Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I think it would work. Wolverine 626. I think you also are onto something. He said the maximum budget for a Trek film should be no higher than $100 million. I concur.
Shouldn't be a reason it shouldn't be that or less.
Yeah. You know,
completely.
But for the Kelvin stuff, they put stuff in storage, but for the most part, everything that they had is gone. Basically, they haven't really done a very good. From what I am hearing, you're gonna have to redesign uniforms anyway. Everybody's in a much different place than they were back when they made Beyond. I mean, now we're looking at. It's been a few years since the last movie. Certain people will either have to do a little bit of dieting or, work out in the gym to get their bodies back. But all these actors are going to want to get paid. And life for all of them has changed even since Star Trek Beyond has come out. Carl Bone is in a way different place than he is, and he has every right to demand $20 million.
Oh, yeah.
You also have Zachary Quanto, who's doing a television series now. He's got his own TV show. He knows he's going to need $20 million. He can demand $20 million because, are you going to go out and get a different actor to play Spock now? Are you going to risk the chemistry that all of these actors have?
That's why you just start over. Don't bring in the same characters. All new, all of it, all new.
It's the best way to go.
And for James's question, Prime Universe or reimagine, I'm saying keep it in the Prime Universe. You've got a great lengthy decades-long history to draw from, and you're not crapping on canon, but you're keeping it alongside what we've already grown up with and love. You've got. For me, it's a built-in audience. I'll watch that. I'll watch that right now. But let's. We've for me, we've told Kirk and Spock and Scotty Uhura's stories on the old series and the old movie. Star Trek VI was the perfect end to that cast's franchise, and I think it should end on that high note. Let's move on. Let's move on with some different characters.
Well.
There's nobody knew who the Next Generation characters were when they premiered, but now they're like they're household names practically. They're huge. That can happen again. I'm not saying lightning in a bottle kind of thing. When Star Wars first came out, there's nothing ever like Star Wars. You'll never do that again, but you can have something that's also unique and beloved if you just keep your heads out of your butts and tell some solid stories.
Well, don't get ahead of ourselves yet. There's a one more story that I want to see with the JJ Trek. One more, and here's my elevator pitch.
Wow. Wow.
I need that in order to restore justice and balance.
I'm shocked beyond the capacity for rational thought.
Can we have Raimi direct that one? Do it right.
Wow. Look, Star Trek is something that is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. We say this stuff because we've enjoyed it so much over the years, and it's kind of sad that someone who obviously has no love for the show, its time period, and characters that they had, they just, it's just, I'm making myself tongue tied trying to get through that.
Well, it's a cultural phenomenon. I mean, it was. There have been things before it in sense that are similar to it, but it was very unique. It's very, very, very innovative. Like Star Wars. Going back to Star Wars, that's a lot of imitators, a lot of similarities with other shows that have come out since then. But Star Wars was a cultural phenomenon. Star Trek was a cultural phenomenon. Doctor Who, same thing. There's been plenty of shows that are similar in some regards, but I think that's why a lot of the old fan base gets so mad and so bent out of shape when the new writers and directors, producers, whatever, do their own spin on it, because it's like you're desecrating that property. It's not like, hey, let's run let's run several episodes of Dallas and Bobby Ewing dies, and then they decide, like, well, that was really a terrible idea, so let's just have him step out of the shower and it was all a dream. You can get away with that, because it's not a cultural phenomenon. I mean, when J.R. Ewing got shot, it was a big deal. I'm old, so I can talk about this. I remember watching it, and other people are listening to this right now saying, like, why is this old man just babbling on? Shouldn't he be at the home already? But it is what it is. No, it's just there's these. I don't want to bandy the word about the properties. They kind of hit the realm of sacred. Not to be blasphemous or be just make too much out of it, but they were extremely, extremely special. I think that's why we hold them in such high regards. I don't run around, talking about the old TV series, The Chronicle, which was a hell of a good series, or The Night Stalker, or Hercules and Xena, Briscoe County, any of the stuff that I really liked and enjoyed. I liked those shows. They're no Star Trek.
I can't. You know what? I'm gonna just put it out here like this. I think David Ellison should just go ahead and explore that possibility. Get the rights back to Paramount and just explore a reimagined version of Star Trek and just leave all the rest of this stuff behind. I think I cannot see having a big screen version of STD is going to sway any people that were not swayed with the television version.
If the television version wasn't successful, the movie is going to be worse.
Yeah.
As far as gaining any kind of money back on it. No, you can't take something that's so poisoned at this point and try to fix it. You have to just close the door and walk away from it. James, I wish.
I just think that overall, looking back on this show, looking at, again, as I said before, the writing staff they had and all of the collective awards that they have won, not just as writing staff for Star Trek, but as individuals, when you look at all of the awards there is absolutely nobody on staff right now, either for STD or Strange New Worlds, whose career will be able to come close to matching what Harlan Ellison did I think that is pretty safe to say that none of those writers are going to have a career like that. They could, but there's a good chance they won't.
Well, there's an awful lot of competition anymore. You were talking earlier about, back at the turn of the 20th century when these writers were coming out, and sci-fi was just, well, I mean, that's all you had. You didn't have TV. You had just kind of an attempt at some of the movies drawing off of those works, but that was your for geeks and nerds, and just people that were into sci-fi and fantasy. That was the height of entertainment, and you didn't have a whole lot of people that were in on that, that were adding to it. So not to say that the genre is watered down. There's a lot of competition. If you open up a store in town that sells widgets and you're the only one in town, well, people are going to have to go to you because they want those things. And then another store opens up that also sells a different kind of widget, but there's kind of enough meat on the bone to go around. But when there's one on every other corner, it's a different story. So that's what makes, I think, it difficult for any new author or any new idea to really catch fire and take off, is because there's just so much to compete against that it makes it very difficult to stand out.
And I can understand that. I do. But man, it's been a heck of a ride. 58 years,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean, I don't think anybody could have really have foretold that this was going to be Star Trek is as far as being recognized the way that it should be, the way that it is, as one of the most influential television programs of all time.
A show that was canceled after its second season.
Yeah.
And 58 years later, we're just it's still going. I don't know necessarily going strong, but it's still going. It's a household word. I mean, everybody's heard of Star Trek. Everybody's like she said in the song, everyone's a superhero, everyone's a Captain Kirk. 99 Luft balloons. Yeah, never mind. I'm old. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. Well, listen, everybody, this has been a fun show. We can go on and continue talking like this for hours more, because that's how great of a show this was and is, in a sense, compared to a lot of the newer stuff. Wait a minute. James says, I think Fuller even bandied about the anthology series premise, but too expensive. That is correct.
It'd be an expensive startup. Yes, it'd be an expensive startup.
That's where the idea from Discovery came from, was when he was pitching the anthology thing. And that was part of what he was describing, what an episode would be like. And an executive decided to go ahead and just greenlight that. Typical.
Can you imagine if that'd been his, if we'd gotten basically Star Trek Discovery only set in an anthology series? Can you imagine how horrible we could just ruin the Star Trek universe in so many different historical timelines? We could have ruined that from conception to end.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. You are so right. Anyway, like I said, this is a great topic. 58 years is a long time. I am not going to hold my breath and hold out for any major celebration Sunday or even 2 years from now.
No.
I'm not expecting, unless something dramatic happens and David Ellison comes in and right off the bat is able to just fire Alex Kurtzman, I'm not expecting anything good. So, yeah. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for participating. Again, it really is. It knocks me out every single time I do this, and I see how many people that are just wanting to be interactive. You guys really are amazing. Every single one of you guys. The triarch of apathy, Penny, Tim, Canadian Spider-Man, James Caserta, John Smith, Snorterputs, Q Burr, Peter Vinkman fan site, Sci-Fi Mombi, because Sci-Fi Mombi is that cool. 11 Alpha, Tree Rock Creations, Monkey Jeebus, Destiny Captain, Gap After Dark, Wolverine 626, Cam, D Bud Martin, Mrs. A, Shanatsky, and Andy Moro. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. We could not have done this though without you. Okay, seriously, everybody, thank you for just being the absolute best. And outside of really talking stuff about New Trek, I want to wish everybody connected with New Trek, with the exception of the producers and writers, a very, very good Star Trek day this Sunday. And just everybody, just do what you can, celebrate Star Trek a little bit, and if you can, just watch your favorite episode. Okay, so for Martin and of course Flash, aka Decker, I've been Keith, and have a good day.